AT&T is using a loophole to wiggle out of providing super cheap internet to the poor. Now, when AT&T purchased DirecTV, that was a merger condition imposed by the Federal Communications Commission to make them provide internet service for either $5 or $10 a month to people with low incomes. AT&T accepted this because it was the only way that they could push through that deal. But now it seems that they found a way to weasel out of it. AT&T is working around this requirement in areas where the company has failed to upgrade its network to anything that resembles modern internet service. In other words, if you live in a place where AT&T has not spent the money to upgrade your download speeds to at least 3 megabits per second, you can't get the discount, and they're not legally bound to provide it for you. Now, this was supposed to be offered to low-income households on the Federal Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. We know that as SNAP. But when the program rolled out, a significant number of households were told that they don't qualify, and furthermore, they will never qualify because AT&T doesn't intend to deploy to those areas. Even when it was proposed to modify that deal to ask for at least 1.5 megabits per second, AT&T didn't go for it. So this is another example of a company that agreed to something that they're not intending to provide. Chibert, I want to throw this to you first because I feel the anger boiling up, and anger leads to hate, and hate leads to me saying really bad things on the stream. Did you get this inkling from the beginning that AT&T was going to find their way out of this? Because when I read this, I could have gone two ways. I could have gone with, well, maybe AT&T is finally trying to do the responsible thing by giving this utility to the people who need it the most. But the other side of me was saying, nope, they're going to find a way not to do it. Which way did you fall?
Oh, no, we called it on this one. This is really and truly a catch-22. They have less bandwidth in certain areas because the people in that area can't afford internet services. So they don't spend money on upgrading, but because they didn't upgrade, they're not obligated to provide what is in essence lifeline services for internet, because the federal government now considers internet to be a necessary tool. Man, talk about a catch-22.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this is, I mean, you can kind of understand it. I do have sympathy for a company like AT&T, which has to do rollout of fiber networks to areas that are never going to recoup the cost. Google has found this out with Google Fiber, that doing any kind of deployment, even a deployment where you can easily get the permits, which in most U.S. cities you can't, is going to be very expensive. I mean, we're talking on the order of $5,000 to $10,000 per house that you pass, or something like $50,000 per mile of open field. So this is not a cheap proposition. And if you're talking about deploying to a very, well, not economically well-off area of the country, that's a cost you will never recoup. You will never be able to get back the capital you're going to put into the project, because by the time you start to break even, it will be time to upgrade the infrastructure. But, and Chibert talked about this, the catch-22 is AT&T now knows if they ever did upgrade those areas, they would have to offer those services at discounts, so they would lose even more money. So rather than forcing AT&T to deploy services to the people who need it, it now gives them a financial incentive not to do it. Curtis, I'm sorry, I got to ask the super general question. How do you fix this? Is there a fair way to go back into the contract and make AT&T own up to the spirit of the deal?
Is there a way to do it? Of course there is. Is that way likely to be implemented? Probably not, because as you say, what it would involve doing is one of two things. The simple thing is to define down where the broadband access is. And the easy answer there would be to just broadly include DSL. That's simple. That would do nothing but cost AT&T some bucks that's now going straight to its bottom line. The much more expensive proposition would be somehow to force AT&T to start upgrading their infrastructure. Many years ago, under the system that was in place where AT&T was a de facto monopoly, that would have been much easier. Now that there is, in most cases, something that approaches genuine competition, even if it is competition from a cell carrier, that becomes much more problematic. So the easy thing to do is to rewrite the contract, define down where broadband is, but that requires political will. And I think that we have at least, call it 3 months to wait before we know whether there's any chance of someone in government mustering that kind of will.
Right. Unfortunately, that does seem to be the case. You know, one of the other issues that I think we should probably talk about when we're talking about this particular program is the fact that AT&T, remember when they took that $200 billion of tax subsidies in order to deploy a next generation network throughout the United States, they claimed that their DSL did count because anything above 1 megabit per second does, under their definition, count as broadband. Now they're turning around because they're looking at the statutes of the contract, and they're saying, well, that's not broadband. If it was broadband, we would have to provide the discount service, but since it's not broadband, we don't. So on one hand, AT&T is claiming that they were entitled to the money that they got from the federal government because they did provide broadband. And on the other hand, the same company is saying that they don't have to offer discounts on service because they don't provide broadband. This, Cheaper, as far as I can remember, this is the first time I remember a company defining and undefining broadband pretty much in the same breath.
It happens all the time, though. You know, as the PS Chop said, yeah, this 1995 broadband. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
It's broadband compared to like a 300 baud modem, I guess. I guess all things are relative, right? Right, Curtis?
Well, it is indeed. And we have to remember that after, let's call it a century of being in business, there is probably not a company in the world that is better at reading and interpreting contracts and regulations in their own favor than AT&T. They've had a ton of experience at it. So yes, they're going to do this. I suspect that if there is enough of a stink made, we'll see some sort of negotiation between the FCC and AT&T, and some more families will get the subsidy. But I don't see an end to what is a legitimate digital divide in this country for a long time to come.
Cheaper, we've got JJ to the 4884 in the chat room, who's summing up what a lot of us are thinking, and that is, can the FCC do anything? I mean, I've totally bought into Tom Wheeler. I think he is actually on the side of consumers. I think he's done a fantastic job as chairman of the FCC. This is right up his bailiwick, but I mean, he's already fighting a lot of fights. But between the net neutrality fight and opening up the polls, which he did, and now going after set-top boxes, does the FCC have the free cycles to fight this? Because it seems as if it affects disproportionately those who do not have a political voice and maybe won't get the same representation up in D.C.
No, I don't know, but Tom Wheeler does have a nuclear option. It's called Lifeline Services.
Right.
If the FCC redefines internet in the same category as telco, that's the nuclear option, and it lays it out so that the poorest consumers get internet practically for free. And I don't think AT&T wants that, because it's going to cost them a boatload of money. And in case of Lifeline, if someone, say a farmer, qualifies for Lifeline, even if AT&T or whoever the carrier is has to run 2 or 3 dozen polls just for that one customer, Lifeline Services says they have to. Again, the nuclear option. I'm not sure Tom Wheeler wants to cross that, but that is one of the quivers for his arrows.
Yeah. I do feel a little bit of the rage coming up. And the rage is this. AT&T, Verizon, and the other telcos who have been fighting back against the net neutrality regulations that were accepted last year, they make a lot of arguments as to why they shouldn't be regulated, why the FCC shouldn't have that power. But what it comes down to is it's an appeal from those companies saying, look, trust us. We will do what's right for the people that we serve. We will do right by our customers. And yet time after time after time, we get this. This is not even a unique example. This is just the latest example of one of these telcos, one of these ISPs, saying, well, you know what, we know it should be our job to provide what we consider a basic utility, but we're not going to do it because we can weasel out of it with a bunch of our high-priced lawyers.